welcome Miles Clark from Cloud Gateways and our two previous speakers. So, Miles, you're going to tell us a little bit about Cloud Gateway's journey, I think.
I am, yeah. Right, yeah, so my name's Miles Clark. I'm the head of marketing at Cloud Gateway. I joined the business back in 2017 when there was just the two founders and myself. Prior to that, I was actually working in publishing, so it was a bit of a career pivot. Yeah, since then, well, we had one customer and 3 people back in those days. Today we have over 200 customers, and I think we had our sort of company all hands last week, and there was 37 of us there. So it's been a really cool journey. Obviously, I think probably most people are familiar with the stats around startups and scale-ups, particularly when you bear in mind we had to go through COVID. So yeah, it's been a good journey. I've thoroughly enjoyed being a part of it. From my perspective, it's been, yeah, kind of came out of the blue, working with some of my closest friends. Yeah, and taking this company from, as I said, one customer through to 200 plus, and hopefully, obviously, the future looks sort of similar to how we've been the last few years. I guess the reason I'm here today is we've had a couple of fairly substantial digital transformation projects go on across the business, one of which I led, one of which I supported on, and I think the idea is to maybe share some of those experiences, the good, the bad.
Yeah, so full disclosure, Cloud Gateway is a joint client of Profound and Passion, and it's also on a technology that we're partners with as well called Storyblock. And we thought it'd be great today to bring to life some of the things we've been talking about this morning with kind of a live customer. So we prepared a few topics that we want Miles to talk through, just about the journey he's been on and trying to make it relatable to the stuff that Alex and I have been saying earlier. And then yeah, you guys can ask some questions as well as we go through this process. So shall I kick off with the first one? So I'm going to start with data, and I think really good to just kind of explain to the guys here how did you approach the operationalization of your data on the journey you've been on? What processes did you go through, and what was my final thought there? Oh yeah, and what was the biggest learning to share with the guys today from a data perspective?
So, like most organisations, we had data absolutely everywhere, disparate systems all over the place, whether that be prospect data, customer data. And so the first thing was an audit of all that data. So we went through a 7-step process. I won't bore you with all the details, but we're kind of looking at the planning and assessment stage, and then in terms of the data, we're kind of looking at what it looks like, where it's stored, the integrity of the data, the completeness of the data, and that was definitely the longest part of the process. And I think we talk about weaponizing the data. It's a little bit aggressive, but we talk about having all this data, but what are we actually doing with it? What's the outcome we're looking to drive from all these activities? The business had got itself into a position, like a lot of startups do, where there was very little governance around how we collected and used data. And if you think back to 2017, GDPR was coming in, so organizations were having to be a lot more responsible with the data they collected from a regulatory perspective. And then just from a business and a marketing and sales perspective, where my focus was, it's, how are we using this in a consistent way to drive value for the business? And from a marketing perspective, it was all about demand, educating our target sectors, our target audiences on the things we do. We're a network security company, so we provide all the underlying infrastructure for several of the kind of biggest public sector entities, so quite a responsibility there. We work in healthcare too, police, so from our perspective, we were competing with the likes of BT, Vodafone, Virgin Media, so these are massive household names. So from our perspective, there was a huge piece of work there, and for us, we were a little bit late, I guess you might argue, but a couple of years in, we started looking at all this data that we've collected and weren't doing enough with. So one of those projects that I mentioned earlier was about leveraging that data, weaponizing that data, whatever word you want to use, to drive consistent business value. So data governance was a big part of that, but in the first instance, it was sort of cleansing that data. That meant culling some, which some parts of the business were reluctant to do, but getting to a place where those foundations were in place so that the analytics and the insights that we were taking from that data were reliable. And I think it's only now that all those months and years, in some cases, hard work to get that data in the right place, centralized, secure, and then governed going forward, because a lot of the issues we had were around cultural and organizational reluctance, I guess, when it comes to new technologies, and I'm sure we'll come on to that in a little bit. So yeah, that was broadly how it went. And like I said, I think from our perspective, we realized very quickly that it's not a finite period of time, digital transformation. We talk about this with our customers. There is no such thing as a beginning and an end. You know, you have key stages and things you want to hit by certain points, but it's a constant thing. It's never gone away. And we're learning that now more than ever as we look to incorporate and integrate new technologies into the stack to continue delivering business value and competing with Virgin and BT and these guys who have deeper pockets and more resource. So yeah, that was kind of the biggest takeaway from that whole experience for me.
Yeah, so you just mentioned technology. So you're a startup, but you must have faced challenges in implementation to the technology in your business. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but my emails, my DMs are inundated with suppliers, with new tools, or an agency that can help us with this, or someone that can help us with that. So the biggest thing from my perspective, as I became responsible for it, sort of maybe 2-3 years ago, is ensuring that the technology doesn't. So it's the requirement that drives the technology rather than the technology driving the requirement, if that makes sense. So it's very easy across the business, really. Tech get a bad rep in our business because that side of the business are always sort of butterflying off and finding these new cool technologies, but marketing are just as guilty, right? And so from our perspective, it was about identifying and selecting the right technology at the right time and taking our time in integrating that into the business. So we learned very quickly that people will promise that you can get this sort of these new technologies installed and there's APIs and there's this and there's that, and to a large extent that's true, but from our perspective that planning and assessment stage was critical. I think both of you guys talked about in your presentations the importance in bringing the business along with you. So I'm of an age, generally speaking, where I'm sort of tech savvy-ish. We've got people in the business who, by their own admission, would perhaps not fall into that category. So the idea of bringing in all these new jazzy tools that are in theory going to help and support them in doing their job, there can be this fear factor. Like you said, is it going to replace what they do? Is it just going to change the way they have to work? They may have been working in a set way with a set tool or with a set supplier for years, decades, and now you're asking them to do things slightly differently. So you have to have patience with that, but it's important to bring those guys along on the journey with you. And for me, that starts when you're vetting these different tools and suppliers, these new technologies, making sure they are right, not just for the marketing team, which I'm responsible for, but making sure they're right for the broader business. And typically for me, that's sales. We've got a really, really capable sales team. I would say the biggest challenge working with them is getting them on board, getting their buy-in, because as soon as you have their buy-in, you can demonstrate the value that these new tools and technologies are going to bring to their lives, it becomes so much easier. So I would say those were certainly some of the biggest challenges. And then it always goes back to data and governance to an extent, because again, you might get them on board in the first instance, but that early momentum can easily wane if they're not completely bought in and you haven't put the right structure and processes in place to kind of govern what is kind of a growing ecosystem of people, processes, and systems. So yeah, I would say those are probably some of the biggest things that we felt.
And from a customer perspective, what did you learn about your customers as you went through this process that was perhaps different to what you thought about them before you started?
So this is an interesting one. So the two co-founders are brilliant, so I'll put that on record straight away before I dig them out. But naturally, in order to have the kind of confidence and the capability and whatnot to create a company like Cloud Gateway, you have to have a good idea, a vision for what customers need. And I think the business was guilty, if I dare say it, of following that vision 7, 8 years ago, which was informed by a very complete set of experiences. But the world is changing all the time, right? Especially in the public sector, and accelerated by COVID. So we were guilty of just knowing what we know, and that must be the truth and will always remain the truth. So again, we learned very quickly that you need a network of people that you're constantly engaged with, informing the decisions that you're making within the business, whether it be technology or otherwise, right? So from a marketing perspective, I suggested, it took me bloody ages to get through, but we got to a point where all new contracts for certain tiers of customers, it's not across the board, they committed to a use case with us. So whether we actually took them up on that offer or that obligation, I guess, we didn't always, but what it allowed me was a contact at the customer who's using the platform all the time, realizing those benefits. It provided me with an in, so I immediately had that relationship that I could tap into over the course of the contract. And as I said, we didn't always even produce the use case. It was just a good touch point for me, access into the business, into their business, insights into what brought them to use Cloud Gateway, had they considered other alternatives, what were the things that they, the key determining factors in using us and our set of services. So that was definitely a good thing. And from there, we've been able to spin up workshops, events like this, where we get a bunch of our own customers in a room. So it's not necessarily generating net new business, but it's so important for me when I'm putting content out there or building new pages on the website or new user journeys, or we're entering new markets. Those insights are like 90% of what I lean on to produce that content. From a product perspective, and this is a little outside of my wheelhouse, but we have a portal basically which consolidates and aggregates all the network traffic, all the security stuff that we have on the platform that the customer is using. And again, as you can imagine, just tons and tons and tons of data. That kind of sat there, again, probably underutilized for a long while. So the project that I was supporting on was about, right, well, how can we utilize that data as well? So from my perspective, again, using that and then those direct one-to-one engagements with customers who are actually using the platform, sort of merging those together. And then obviously there's tons of industry news, analyst houses constantly putting new stuff out there. So yeah, bringing those three things together, consolidating those things gives us what we believe is the right platform to launch all of our marketing and sales activities.
Did you find anything surprising when you've been looking at that customer data, something that you didn't expect, something that you thought your customer was X, Y, Z, and it actually?
So one thing springs to mind actually. So, BT, Vodafone, those guys are managed service providers, right? So you don't just buy it, you buy it and then they run it for you. And we were reluctant to call ourselves a managed service provider because they are synonymous in our industry and space in particular with poor customer service, not investing the time in perhaps the ways that we have. And so we overcompensate to an extent by doing that more. But what we found is, actually, people didn't just want the option to have a managed service. They also wanted self-serve, hence the portal project. The portal project's primary driver in the first instance was how can we provide and deliver these services in a different way to cater for the spectrum of customers we have. So if we have the Ministry of Justice at one end, kind of our flagship customer, the one we're most proud, but everyone knows who the Ministry of Justice is, right down to the kind of explosion of health tech organizations that might only have 4 or 5 people, exactly like we were sort of 7, 8 years ago. Yeah, it's quite a wide breadth of people that you're dealing with and ways in which they're engaging with the platform. And so, yeah, that product portal was kind of the next big step in listening to what the market was saying, listening specifically to what certain customers, subsectors were saying, and reacting to it, to the extent that project cost, a lot of money, a lot of time. Without those engagements, I think we'd have been much slower to realize that, and therefore much slower to deliver our services in a way that the customer wants to consume them.
So I know I said don't get distracted with tech and AI, but I still got to ask, how open are you at leveraging this kind of technology in your business? Are you doing it at the moment, or are you planning to use it to some extent?
Yeah, so again, we'll touch on maybe both those two projects. I'll start with the product one. Again, there are probably more qualified people in the business to talk about this, but the whole idea and concept was around self-healing networks. So we build most of our network infrastructure in cloud. A lot of our competitors build it in physical infrastructure. And we wanted to get to a point where the trends and behaviors that we saw within a network, whether it be user behavior or just whatever connectivity mechanism they're using, security and cybersecurity threats and issues, we wanted to get to a point where we can detect those before they happen. Because these 5 things happen and then there's a security breach, or then someone does something they shouldn't. So when we see those 5 things happen again, we know that we've got 30 minutes to go and speak to the customer or to make a configuration change at our end. We're not quite there yet, but that's the aspiration, to get to a point where, and again, we come back to bringing the business along with you. For the tech team, they look at that and think, oh, is that replacing my job? It's not. It's just making their job easier. So rather than concentrating on the tactical stuff, they can concentrate on the strategic stuff. They can actually be out talking to their peers, our customers, learning what they want and need, so that the next thing after that is ready and good to go. So definitely more happening there live as we speak now in that corner of the business. In ours, we're using all the kind of AI tools that you'd expect we use when it comes to kind of content and ideation, like ChatGPT, Gemini. We use those things. We work in a space where, as I alluded to earlier, we're trying to compete with much bigger players than ourselves. So we do a lot of founder-led marketing, which is basically getting Justin, our CEO, out there. A lot of the social media platforms penalize company accounts in a way they don't personal profiles. So from our perspective, we can extend our reach much more if we are able to present our senior leadership, our genuine thought leaders, in an effective way. So when it comes to that sort of stuff, building out plans, building out campaigns, we use some of those tools. We're very open-minded. We're a tech company. We're born in cloud. The culture that's been very much installed into the culture of the company. Ultimately, if you take the fact it's tech and it can feel daunting away, it's essentially looking at, why would you turn down potentially new ways to improve the way you work and operate? And although we have grown and we're very proud of the rate at which we've grown, we could always do with more people. So from my perspective, we service a sales team that's 4 or 5 times bigger than us with 3 people. We need to be able to scale and scale relatively quickly. And some of those tools have really helped us with that. And as new ones emerge, we will be very receptive to that. Like I said, there's a lot out there, so it can be quite daunting, and none of us are experts in all of them. So from my perspective, we lean on agencies like yourself. We have a really good network of agencies that we use to support us. We learn very quickly. You can't do everything yourself. We kind of have that startup, scale-up mentality, but that only goes so far. You need to lean on the expertise of others. So when it comes to new technologies, you guys and others like yourselves, you'd be our first port of call if we hear something or we want to explore something. We're at a presentation like this and something sort of gets us excited, we'll go away and do that research. And obviously what we have in place, I talk about it a lot with my team, they're probably bored of hearing me talk about it, is this kind of like repeatability angle, right? There's only 3 of us. We can't do everything from scratch every single time. So the governance around selecting the right technology for us is important. So I wouldn't say we're super strict, but there are forms to fill in. There are processes to go through. I must get 2 or 3 new requests a week from sales and or marketing. I'd like this, I'd like that. And yeah, you frankly can't say, we're like I said, we're a scale-up startup. So budget is what it is. We have a sensible marketing budget, but it's finite. And so from our perspective, it's about making sure we don't invest a load of time integrating a new technology only to find that only one person uses it. The rest of the business isn't getting any value from it.
It's important, that communication, right? I'm bringing all the business with you. So I think we're going to open the floor, unless you have many more burning questions.
I just wondered if there was one thing that you could share with the guys that you did through your transformation that you wouldn't do again.
Well, there's a few to choose from. Tell you what, we've made so many mistakes. You do, and those are the ones you learn from, right? So I am pretty humble in, we made mistakes, but they kind of fail fast. I would generally say, and it is obviously topical for today, is you don't have to do everything yourself. At one point there was 3 of us, so I wasn't just in charge of marketing, I was also a project manager, I was also this, I was also on the help desk, I was on call for the first year and a half of having no idea what I was going to say if someone rang me up and said, that was the nature of the business. But as we've matured, and obviously, 5-6 years on, that's no longer the case, and we now have the budget and we now have the resource to go out and get people smarter than ourselves in certain areas to help complement and supplement what we're already doing. And you guys have come in and gone, we like that, I'd maybe consider changing that. That's we could have achieved that ourselves, but it would have taken longer. And we have quite ambitious growth plans, so bringing guys like you on board has accelerated that and frankly made my life a lot easier.
Nice. Thanks, Miles.
Yeah.
So we've got a few questions that you guys have sent us in advance, but I was just wondering, are there any questions in the room for any of our 3 speakers? The lady in the corner.
Yeah, it's about the right thing for the customer. So I'm not advocating in any way that you replace the consultative sale where it's really required, but you can't be with the customer all the time. So how can you support them in their decision making when they're not at lunch with you, when they're not on the phone with you? Can you find smart ways to retarget them through marketing activities? Can you think of some unique ways to have a touch point with them that they wouldn't be expecting, that your competitors wouldn't be doing? So can you, using the data in your CRM, using lookalike personas and things like that, can you automate touch points for them that enhance the more relationship side of things that is required? So yeah, I absolutely agree. There are some sales that you just can't substitute digital people with digital because you need that consultative sale, but I think you can enhance that process and make it more successful.
Very articulately earlier about how B2B customers' expectations of the experience is shaped by the experiences in personal life in B2C environments. How far are you able to deliver Netflix-style experiences to your customers?
You're absolutely right, though, and we're seeing that. Our primary target audience is generally sort of senior IT people. As a demographic, you can make some assumptions about those. We try not to overgeneralize, but some of the statistics that you had on the board resonated with what we're seeing. I'd say we're a consultative sell in terms of those big WAN deals that we're looking at, probably sort of similar figures to what you're talking about. So, but then at the other end of our commodity, people want to be able to go onto the website, and we now have the functionality that they can go on and get a demo of our portal. They can actually play around with it, see what we do, get a feel for the sorts of stuff they're going to be buying. We're obviously there at the end of a phone if they need us, but we're starting to see customers. The dream was obviously they would come onto the website, go onto the demo of sorts, and then procure through the website. That took a long while for those first few for that to actually happen. We had to really optimize that journey, and that meant for me the biggest challenge was merging those two different audiences, the ones that are going to be coming on and spending a few £1,000s a year on a commodity connectivity service versus the ones that wanted to come on and potentially replace their whole WAN, which is, there's a multi-million-pound contract. So blending those two audience on the website, demonstrating our credibility, you know, and again, always remember that the bar for us is BT and it's these guys, so it's so tricky. But at the other end, and this was the project we talked about, there was a big part of our audience, sort of the larger, like the volume of our audience, didn't want that. They actually don't really want to be speaking to a salesperson. They want you to be able to demonstrate your credentials, demonstrate the value of the platform without actually speaking to anyone. So that's become a real focus over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. And obviously we can then take all that data that we get when people are landing on the website and how they're behaving and interacting with the different areas of it. But yeah, that's a challenge we're still wrestling with, and ultimately as things go forward, I think those two target audiences might actually move slightly further apart for us, which makes that an even bigger challenge. So yeah, it's definitely keeping me busy.
Yeah. Working on it.
Yeah.
Good. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question from Miles as well. I'm Simon from Storybook.
Hi.
So I was just curious, obviously digital transformation is often about like optimizing what you have, but I'd be interested to hear, are there any examples of things that you think, had you not gone through this journey, you just fundamentally wouldn't be able to do at the moment? Yeah, just curious to see if there's...
I think we'd have probably got there eventually with nearly all of the things that we've achieved so far. I think what it's enabled us to do is accelerate the timelines on those, and that's such a big driver. Essentially, if I say to my boss, I need 2 weeks, he'll ask me why I can't do it in 1. I can almost predict that is what he's going to say. So I now say I need 3 weeks so that when he says 2, you know, yeah. That's the nature of the world we live in now, right? It's definitely the nature of the world I live in most of the time. And that is in stark contrast with a lot of our customers who operate at a much slower pace. But yeah, we're constantly, you know, in terms of the technology and the edge we believe we have, we're well aware if some of these organizations wanted to go and build what we do, it might take them a couple of years and a lot of money, but they possibly could do it. So we can't afford to wait. So everything is time sensitive. So for me, all these exercises that we've gone through, and some have gone well, some perhaps haven't gone so well, all those learnings that we've taken have allowed us to get to where we are now sooner. We joke regularly, if we started Cloud Gateway again tomorrow, how long would it take to achieve what we've achieved in this last 7 years? And we think we can generally do it in half the time. That goes to show how many times we've got it wrong. But for me personally, and the business more broadly, those experiences have served us really well. And of course, you can't go back in time, and we're not going to reset the company tomorrow, so we are where we are. So those mistakes that we learned in the first couple of years, we're not going to repeat again. And I think from our perspective now, sort of 2-3 years ago, when these sort of projects were beginning to come on board, that's the template we're going to follow going forward. So yeah, I'd say it's the timeline that it's accelerated rather than anything else.
Nice one. Good. Any other questions? I've got a couple that I need to ask that you've sent online. No more questions? All right. Alex, this is one for you. What is a non-negotiable within a digital strategy, and has it changed recently? Do you expect it to change within the next?
Well, like I said before, your website is non-negotiable. You need to have it. Like, people expect you to be there. It's your trust signal. It's your brand. It's your tone. It's your people. It's your digital footprint. So for me personally, the website is non-negotiable.
Yeah. And I think also, depending on what, for a B2B custom brand, definitely, I think like social media has gone so important as well. Depending on what type of business you are, you definitely, your website might not work that hard for you if all your informational content can be found on social media. But again, it depends, varies so much on the industry. Yeah, but for cloud gateways, maybe not that much, right? Like TikTok videos of the clouds.
Yeah. TikTok's not something we've explored yet.
Yeah. And I've got one for Tim, I think, but anyone can answer as well. When selecting a new CMS, what are the top 3 considerations that are often overlooked?
Okay, I'll keep this brief because the breakfast is on its way.
Yeah.
So 3. I think businesses or teams often underestimate the amount of time it takes to produce content, new content, migrate content, or populate new content. If you're redesigning experiences, sometimes your old content doesn't fit really well into the new experiences, and it always starts too late in the process, and it's always the thing that stops us from going live on time.
Because it's the easy bit, right? So
yeah, it's the easy bit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the number one. What else is overlooked? I think. Sorry. No, that's all right. Well, you can chip in. I'm trying to narrow it down to the top three. I think people often forget to put a business case in, an ROI on the projects, and try to say, well, we will just get more customers, but actually you need to bring it to life, because if it's going to be something that continually evolves over time, you're going to ask for more budget in the future. You need to be able to prove at the beginning what it's going to be. Third one, go on, Nick.
I'm going to combine two into one.
Go on then.
So business users and the effort to migrate.
There we go.
Significant. If you don't think about your business users, they won't like the tool you want. You might think it's shiny, but your business users might think, actually, it's not going to help me do my job. And the effort to migrate content, that's also something that's overlooked quite often.
Can I add one really important one? Sorry, accessibility. People need to focus and make accessibility top of their agenda now, rather than as something they retrofit later on. If you design it in from the beginning, it's a lot simpler to adopt it and have it there, so your website becomes available for everybody and you don't accidentally discriminate. Buy 3, get 2 free.
Very good. I think, unless there's any other questions, we're bang on time. Yeah, breakfast is going to be starting now. Just remember that on the back of your namey bit, you have what you ordered for breakfast, because I know that you probably don't remember. So, so that's it. Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys.